The first time Eliza James noticed the silver Audi in the parking lot of Ridgeview Medical Center, she was already 20 minutes late for her shift. Rain pelted against her windshield as she frantically searched for a spot, cursing under her breath. Just as despair began to set in, the headlights of the Audi flashed twice, and the driver, a man with dark hair and kind eyes, gestured to the empty space beside him. With relief flooding through her, Eliza maneuvered her beat-up Honda Civic into the spot, grabbed her bag, and dashed toward the hospital entrance without a backward glance. By the time she clocked in at the nurse's station, the stranger with the kind eyes was forgotten. But the next morning, there he was again, same car, same parking spot. This time, when Eliza pulled in beside him, he offered a small wave before turning back to whatever he was reading on his phone. She returned the gesture hesitantly, noticing his impeccable suit and the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. For the next 2 weeks, their routine continued. Eliza would arrive at the hospital for her 7 a.m. shift, and the mysterious man in the silver Audi would already be there, always in the same spot, always with a smile or a wave. Sometimes they'd arrive at precisely the same moment, and he'd wait patiently while she gathered her things, never rushing, never intruding. On a particularly frigid Monday in November, Eliza's car refused to start. She sat in the hospital parking lot, turning the key repeatedly as her engine made pathetic whining noises. Tears of frustration welled in her eyes. She couldn't afford repairs, not with her student loans and her mother's medical bills piling up. A gentle tap on her window startled her. It was him, the Audi man, standing in the cold without a coat, concern etched across his face. "Need some help?" he asked when she rolled down her window. Up close, Eliza could see that his eyes were a deep blue, like the ocean on a clear day. He had a strong jawline and the kind of smile that made you feel instantly at ease. "I think it's the battery," Eliza said, wiping away a stray tear. "But I don't have jumper cables." "I do, and I'm pretty good with cars. Mind if I take a look?" His name, she learned as he worked on her car, was Kieran Novak. He spoke with gentle confidence as he connected the cables between their vehicles, explaining each step with patience. "You're here early every day," Eliza remarked, curiosity finally getting the better of her. "Do you work at the hospital?" Kieran smiled, but there was something guarded in his expression. "No, I'm just visiting someone, every morning before work." Before Eliza could ask more, her car rumbled to life. Relief washed over her, followed quickly by embarrassment at having broken down in front of this immaculately dressed stranger. "Thank you so much," she said, gathering her composure. "I'm Eliza, by the way, Eliza James. I'm a pediatric nurse here." "It's nice to officially meet you, Eliza James," Kieran replied, his voice warm despite the chill in the air. "See you tomorrow," she nodded, suddenly shy. "Same spot," his smile widened. "Same spot." True to his word, Kieran was there the next day and the day after that. Their parking lot exchanges grew longer, moving beyond simple greetings to genuine conversations. Eliza learned that Kieran was 34, just 3 years older than herself, that he preferred tea to coffee, and that he had a dog named Edison. But whenever she asked about his work or who he was visiting at the hospital, he'd skillfully change the subject. One morning, Eliza arrived to find not the silver Audi but a sleek black Range Rover in its place. Kieran stood beside it, holding 2 cups and looking slightly nervous. "I thought you might like some tea," he said, extending one of the cups toward her. "You mentioned you've been pulling double shifts." The gesture was so unexpected, so thoughtful, that Eliza felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the steaming beverage. "That's really kind of you," she said, accepting the tea. Their fingers brushed, and Eliza felt a flutter in her stomach. "New car," Kieran glanced at the Range Rover and shrugged. "The Audi's in the shop. This is just a loaner. Just a loaner." As if a Range Rover was a bicycle someone had lent him for the afternoon. Eliza took a sip of her tea, perfectly prepared with just a hint of honey, and wondered again what Kieran did for a living. Their morning ritual continued through November and into December. Some days they only had time for a quick hello. Other mornings, they'd spend 15 minutes leaning against their cars, talking about everything and nothing. Eliza found herself looking forward to these encounters more than she cared to admit, planning her outfits more carefully and leaving her apartment a few minutes earlier just to ensure she'd see him. "Why don't you ever park closer to the entrance?" she asked one day after watching Kieran trudge through a fresh snowfall toward the hospital doors. "There are usually spots available when you arrive." He looked at her with those ocean-deep eyes and smiled. "Then I wouldn't get to see you, would I?" The confession hung in the air between them, simple but profound. Eliza felt her cheeks flush, and not from the cold. "Who are you visiting?" she asked again, suddenly needing to know more about this man who had become such a constant in her life. "In the hospital, I mean." For a moment it seemed Kieran might deflect again, but then his shoulders dropped slightly. "My father, he has early onset Alzheimer's. I come every morning to have breakfast with him before the confusion sets in. The afternoons are harder for him." The vulnerability in his admission made Eliza's heart ache. "I'm sorry, that must be difficult." "It is," Kieran admitted, "but it's also precious time. Each good morning is a gift." Eliza thought about her own mother, who had been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis 3 years earlier. "I understand that. My mom has missed. That's actually why I moved back to this area, to be closer to her." Something shifted between them in that moment. A deeper connection formed through shared understanding of what it meant to watch a parent struggle. To feel both powerful in your desire to help and powerless against the progression of disease. The next morning, Eliza arrived to find a small gift bag hanging from her parking spot sign. Inside was a beautiful blue scarf with a note. "To keep you warm on your walks inside. Coffee sometime?" Her heart racing, Eliza glanced around the parking lot, but Kieran's car wasn't there. She wrapped the scarf around her neck, breathing in its luxurious softness, and headed into work with a smile she couldn't suppress. It wasn't until her lunch break that she saw him. Kieran was standing in the hospital cafeteria, scanning the room with a tray in his hands. When their eyes met, his face lit up and he made his way to her table. "Is this seat taken?" he asked, his voice hesitant in a way she hadn't heard before. Eliza gestured for him to sit. "Thank you for the scarf. It's beautiful." "It matches your eyes," he said simply, then looked down at his tray as if embarrassed by his own forwardness. They ate together, their conversation flowing easily despite the new setting. Kieran asked thoughtful questions about her work, listening intently as she described the challenges and rewards of pediatric nursing. When she mentioned the hospital fundraiser coming up that weekend, a formal gala she was helping organize but couldn't afford to attend, his eyes brightened. "Would you like to go, with me I mean?" he asked, his usual confidence wavering slightly. "As my date," Eliza hesitated. "It's a black tie event. Tickets are $500 each." I'd be happy to get the tickets," Kieran interjected gently. "I'd really like to take you if you're interested." There was something in his expression and earnestness, a vulnerability that made Eliza nod before she could overthink it. "Yes, I'd like that." The next few days passed in a blur of anticipation. Eliza raided her closest friend's wardrobe, eventually borrowing a simple black gown that her friend had worn as a bridesmaid years earlier. It was elegant enough, she hoped, though certainly not new or designer. Saturday evening arrived, and with it, a text from Kieran. "I'll pick you up at 7. Looking forward to seeing you." Precisely at 7, Eliza's doorbell rang. When she opened it, her breath caught in her throat. Kieran stood before her in a perfectly tailored tuxedo that accentuated his broad shoulders and lean frame. His hair was neatly styled, and in his hands was a small bouquet of white roses. "You look beautiful," he said, his eyes taking her in with such genuine appreciation that Eliza momentarily forgot her insecurities about her borrowed dress and drugstore makeup. "Thank you," she managed, accepting the flowers. "You clean up pretty well yourself." The drive to the hotel where the gala was being held was filled with comfortable conversation, though Eliza couldn't help noticing that the car, a different one this time, a sleek black Mercedes, had that unmistakable new car smell and features she'd only seen in luxury car commercials. "Do you work for a car dealership or something?" she asked, only half joking. "This is the third different car I've seen you in." Kieran laughed, a sound that sent pleasant ripples down her spine. "No, not quite, I just like cars." Before she could press further, they arrived at the hotel. A valet rushed to open Eliza's door, and Kieran handed over his keys with a generous tip. Inside, the ballroom was transformed into a winter wonderland, with ice sculptures and twinkling lights creating a magical atmosphere. As they entered, Eliza was struck by how many people seemed to know Kieran. Hospital board members, doctors she recognized but had never spoken to. Even the mayor, they all approached him with warm handshakes and familiar greetings. Kieran introduced her to each person graciously, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back in a gesture that felt both protective and possessive. "How do you know all these people?" Eliza whispered after a particularly effusive greeting from the hospital's chief of surgery. Before Kieran could answer, the event coordinator tapped a microphone, calling for attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Ridgeview Medical Center's annual Winter Gala. Before dinner is served, I'd like to thank our generous sponsors, particularly Novak Industries, whose donation of $5 million this evening will fund our new pediatric oncology wing." Applause erupted around them as a spotlight found Kieran in the crowd. He raised a hand in acknowledgement, his smile modest but his posture confident, the demeanor of a man accustomed to such recognition. Eliza stared at him, pieces falling into place. The luxury cars, the expensive clothes, the way everyone seemed to know him. Kieran wasn't just a visitor at the hospital. He was Kieran Novak of Novak Industries, one of the wealthiest men in the state. $5 million, she whispered when the attention had shifted away from them. "You donated $5 million. Kieran turned to face her, concern etched in his features. "I wanted to tell you properly, not like this. I'm sorry." Eliza felt dizzy with the revelation. She'd shared intimate details of her financial struggles with this man, complained about her student loans, even let him jump-start her car, all while he could have bought the entire hospital parking lot if he'd wanted to. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her voice small. "Because for the first time in years, someone was seeing me, not my bank account," Kieran replied, his eyes pleading for understanding. "When we talk in the parking lot, I'm just a guy visiting his dad, not a CEO or a donor or whatever title people want to give me. With you, I'm just Kieran." The sincerity in his voice made Eliza's initial shock fade. She thought about their conversations, how Kieran had never once made her feel inferior despite the vast difference in their circumstances. How he listened when she talked about her patients or her mother's condition. How his eyes lit up when she entered the parking lot each morning. "I need some air," she said, turning toward the terrace doors. Outside, the December night was crisp but not unbearable. Eliza leaned against the railing, processing everything. A moment later, Kieran joined her, respectfully keeping some distance between them. "My father built Novak Industries from nothing," he said quietly. Medical equipment was his specialty: hospital beds, Roman IV stands, monitoring devices. Things that seem mundane but make a huge difference in patient care. When he got sick, I took over the company. Eliza turned to look at him, seeing not the billionaire the rest of the room had applauded, but the man who visited his father every morning, who noticed the color of her eyes, who waited in the cold to help her with her car. "The new pediatric wing," she said, realization dawning. "That's why you asked about my work. You knew I was involved." Kieran nodded. "I've been funding research for Alzheimer's for years, but after meeting you, hearing about your passion for your pediatric patients, I wanted to help there too. So you donated $5 million, just like that." A small smile played at the corners of his mouth. Well, not just like that. There were meetings, proposals, budgets to review, but yes, essentially. The magnitude of his generosity stunned her. Eliza thought about the children she cared for, how many lives would be improved by this new facility. Yet beneath her admiration was a lingering uncertainty. Why me, Kieran? You could be with anyone, models, heiresses, people from your world. He stepped closer then, his gaze intense. Because when my car wouldn't start in that parking lot, you offered to help me. You in your scrubs, already late for your shift, stopped to help someone you thought was just an ordinary guy having car trouble. You didn't know who I was and you didn't care. You were just kind. Eliza remembered that day how Kieran had seemed flustered, tapping his steering wheel in frustration. She'd stopped without thinking twice. Your car didn't actually need help, did it? She asked, suspicion creeping in. Kieran had the grace to look sheepish. No, I just wanted to talk to you. I'd been working up the courage for weeks. Despite herself, Eliza laughed. The idea of this powerful man, this billionaire, faking car trouble just to speak with her was both absurd and incredibly endearing. So where does this leave us? She asked, sobering. I'm still a nurse with student debt. You're still? Well, Kieran reached for her hand, his touch gentle but certain. It leaves us wherever we want to be. I'm still the guy who parks beside you every morning. You're still the woman I've fallen for a little more each day. The rest is just circumstance. The music from inside drifted out to them, a slow, romantic melody that seemed to suspend the moment in time. Kieran's eyes never left hers as he extended his hand in invitation. Dance with me, under the stars, on a terrace overlooking the city. Eliza stepped into Kieran's arms. They moved together as if they'd done so 1,000 times before, her head eventually coming to rest against his chest where she could hear the steady beating of his heart. I can't offer you private jets or vacation homes, she murmured, voicing her deepest insecurity. Kieran's arms tightened around her. I don't want those things from you. I want your smile in the morning when you see me waiting. I want your compassion, your strength, your heart. That's worth more than anything I own. When they kissed, finally, it was sweet and profound, a beginning rather than an ending. The weeks that followed were a delicate balance as they navigated their new relationship. Kieran still waited for her in the parking lot each morning, but now they often carpooled into the hospital together, sharing coffee and conversation before parting ways. He to have breakfast with his father, she to begin her shift. Their worlds merged gradually. Kieran introduced Eliza to his closest friends, none of whom treated her with anything less than warmth and respect. Eliza brought him to Sunday dinners with her mother, who took one look at the way Kieran held her daughter's hand and declared him a keeper. For Eliza's birthday in February, Kieran surprised her with tickets to a weekend medical conference she'd mentioned wanting to attend but couldn't afford. It was the perfect gift, thoughtful, practical, and aligned with her passion. When she tried to protest that it was too expensive, he gently reminded her that experiences and education were investments, not extravagances. Besides, he added with a smile, I booked 2 rooms, no presumptions. That night, after the first day of lectures, they sat in the hotel restaurant discussing the latest advances in pediatric care. Kieran listened attentively as Eliza described a presentation on innovative pain management techniques, asking insightful questions that revealed his genuine interest in her field. You know, Eliza said, twirling pasta around her fork, for a man who could buy anything, you're remarkably good at giving things that money can't buy. Kieran looked at her questioningly. Time, she clarified. Attention, understanding. Those morning conversations in the parking lot, they became the best part of my day long before I knew about your bank account. Something vulnerable flickered across Kieran's face. When my father first got sick, people treated him differently. Not the medical staff, they were wonderful, but his so-called friends, business associates. They started speaking louder, slower, as if his mind was already gone. They stopped seeing him and only saw his disease. He reached across the table, taking Eliza's hand. Then I met you. And you looked at me, really looked at me, without knowing or caring about Novak Industries or my net worth. Do you have any idea how rare that is in my world? Eliza squeezed his hand, understanding dawning. Is that why you kept it a secret for so long? You were afraid I'd change toward you, partially, Kieran admitted. But mostly, I was enjoying being just a guy in a parking lot falling in love with a beautiful nurse. The words hung between them, honest and unadorned, falling in love. Neither had said it explicitly until now. Falling in love, Eliza repeated softly. Kieran's thumb traced circles on her palm, his eyes never leaving hers. Fallen, completely, irrevocably. That night they shared their first room together, exploring each other with tender reverence that spoke of commitment rather than casual passion. In the quiet aftermath, lying in Kieran's arms, Eliza felt a sense of belonging she'd never experienced before. I love you too, she whispered against his chest, feeling his heart rate quicken at her words. Spring arrived, bringing with it new beginnings. Kieran's father had good days and bad days, but on one particularly lucid morning, he took Eliza's hand and said, "He smiles differently now. Because of you." The pediatric oncology wing was completed ahead of schedule, a gleaming testament to what resources and determination could accomplish. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, Kieran insisted that Eliza stand beside him, acknowledging her influence on the project. This facility exists because a dedicated nurse helped me understand what these children and their families truly need, he told the assembled crowd, his voice strong with conviction. Sometimes the greatest philanthropy starts with simply listening to the right person. Later that night, as they walked through the empty corridors of the new wing, Kieran stopped before a plaque beside the entrance to the playroom. The Eliza James Therapeutic Play Center, Eliza read aloud, her voice catching. Kieran, you didn't have to, I wanted to, he said simply. This room, this place where children can still be children despite their illness, this embodies everything I love about you. Your compassion, your belief that healing involves more than medicine. Your heart. Tears welled in Eliza's eyes as she traced the letters of her name. Thank you. For seeing me, for valuing what I do. Always, Kieran promised, drawing her close. In June, nearly a year after their first parking lot encounter, Kieran suggested they have breakfast at the small cafe inside the hospital where they often met after his visits with his father. It had become their special place, unpretentious and comfortable, with staff who knew their usual orders and no paparazzi lurking in corners. When Eliza arrived, Kieran was already seated at their regular table by the window, looking uncharacteristically nervous. A small velvet box sat beside his coffee cup. Good morning, she said, sliding into the chair across from him, her heart beginning to race at the sight of the box. Do you know what today is? Kieran asked, taking her hand across the table. Eliza thought for a moment. Tuesday. He laughed, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. It is Tuesday, but it's also exactly 1 year since you offered to help me with my perfectly functional car. 1 year since I finally found the courage to speak to the beautiful nurse who had been brightening my mornings for weeks before that. With his free hand, he pushed the velvet box toward her. I had a whole speech prepared, but sitting here now, looking at you, all I can think is that I want every morning to start with you. Not just in a parking lot, but in our home, in our life together. Tears blurred Eliza's vision as Kieran opened the box to reveal a stunning but tasteful diamond ring. Eliza James, would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife? Around them, the cafe had gone quiet, hospital staff and visitors watching with bated breath. But Eliza saw only Kieran, not the billionaire, not the CEO, but the man who waited in the cold to see her smile, who visited his father faithfully each day, who valued her work and her heart above all else. Yes, she said, her voice clear and certain. Yes, I will marry you, Kieran Novak. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit applause erupted around them. Kieran leaned across the table to kiss her, a promise sealed before witnesses who had watched their love story unfold in coffee cups and shared lunches. I have one condition, Eliza said when they parted, her eyes twinkling with mischief. Kieran raised an eyebrow, his hand still holding hers. Anything? We keep our parking spots side by side no matter what. His laughter was joyous and free. Always, my love. That's where our story began, after all. They married in September in the hospital's garden, with Kieran's father having a remarkably good day and Eliza's mother radiant in her mother of the bride dress. It was an intimate ceremony with only their closest friends and family, followed by a reception where hospital staff mingled with business executives, united in their celebration of a love that had started with a simple parking spot and a smile. For their honeymoon, they traveled to Italy, exploring ancient villages and seaside towns at a leisurely pace. In a small restaurant in Positano, overlooking the Mediterranean, Kieran presented Eliza with papers for a foundation they would run together, one dedicated to improving medical care for both Alzheimer's patients and children with cancer. Our legacy, he said as Eliza read through the documents, understanding the magnitude of what they could accomplish together. Built on what matters to both of us. Upon their return, they moved into a home that was grand but not ostentatious, with rooms designed for comfort rather than show. Most importantly, it was located exactly halfway between the hospital and Kieran's father's care facility, allowing them both to maintain their morning routines. And every day, without fail, they parked side by side in the hospital lot, the sleek Audi and Eliza's Honda, which she had refused to replace despite Kieran's offers. It's reliable, she insisted, and it reminds me of where we started. Besides, I like that no one expects the woman driving this old Honda to be married to you. Kieran would smile at that, understanding her desire to remain grounded, to be valued for her work rather than her marriage. It was one of the countless reasons he loved her. One morning, as winter descended again on the city, Eliza joined Kieran for breakfast with his father, something she did occasionally, treasuring the glimpses of the man who had raised the husband she adored. I have news, she said when there was a lull in conversation, her eyes meeting Kieran's with barely contained excitement. We're going to need a bigger car. It took Kieran a moment to understand, but when he did, his face transformed with such pure joy that Eliza's heart nearly burst. A baby. He whispered, reaching for her hand across the table. She nodded, tears of happiness threatening to spill. Due in July, I just found out yesterday. Kieran's father, in a moment of perfect clarity, raised his juice glass in a toast. To parking lots, he said with a knowing smile. And to the greatest wealth a man can have, love and family. As Kieran kissed her, right there in the care facility dining room, Eliza reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From strangers exchanging smiles across a parking lot to partners creating a life together, it was more than she had ever dared to dream. I love you, Kieran murmured against her lips. Every day, a little more than the day before, even when I'm hormonal and huge, Eliza teased. Especially then, he promised, his hand moving to rest protectively over her still flat stomach. Because every day with you is a gift I never expected to receive. And in that moment, surrounded by love and promise, Eliza knew that the true wealth in her life had nothing to do with Kieran's billions and everything to do with the man himself, the one who had waited each morning in a parking lot, hoping for nothing more than her smile and a chance to say hello.